I can see them. Don't move!
They're up, officer. I'm not moving. Just take it easy.
Get on the ground now!
Look, my hands are right here. I've got my daughter behind me. Nobody wants trouble.
Please, sir, she's scared. Just, please.
Sir, don't test
I'm
me!
not. I'm cooperating. Look at her. She's 5 years old. Let's all keep our heads,
Turn
all
around.
right?
On a quiet suburban street where children play and neighbors wave hello, a decorated military hero stood face to face with his worst nightmare. Not enemy combatants, not foreign adversaries, but the very system he'd sworn to protect. His wife clutched their daughter tight, tears streaming down her face as her body shielded their child from what was unfolding. The badges were supposed to represent safety. Instead, they represented terror. What crime had this family committed? What danger did they pose? The answer would shake a community to its core. Because the man they were degrading, the father they were threatening, the soldier they failed to recognize, had more authority in his little finger than they'd ever hold in their entire careers. Marcus Freeman had always been a big man, not just in stature, though his 6'3", 280-pound frame certainly commanded attention, but in presence, in purpose, in the quiet, unshakable confidence that came from 2 decades of serving his country in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. His neighbors, in the peaceful suburb of Riverside, knew him as the friendly dad who coached Little League on weekends, the guy who'd help jumpstart your car in the winter or lend you his lawnmower without a second thought. They knew his wife, Angela, a nurse at the local hospital whose warmth could light up an entire room, and they adored his 5-year-old daughter, Zara, whose laughter echoed through the cul-de-sac every evening as she chased butterflies in their front yard. What most neighbors didn't know was that Marcus Freeman was a Delta Force commander, one of the most elite soldiers in the entire United States military, the kind of man who'd led covert operations in hostile territories, who'd made split-second decisions that saved countless lives, who'd earned medals and commendations that sat quietly in a box in his closet because he never felt the need to broadcast his service. He'd retired from active duty 6 months ago, choosing family over another deployment, choosing bedtime stories over midnight extractions, choosing normal over necessary. And normal felt good. That Saturday afternoon started like any other. Marcus had just returned from the hardware store, his truck loaded with supplies for the treehouse he'd been building in the backyard, a surprise for Zara's 6th birthday next month. Angela was inside preparing lunch. Zara was drawing with chalk on the driveway, creating an elaborate hopscotch course that sprawled across the concrete. Marcus smiled as he stepped out of his truck, watching his daughter's concentration, the pure, innocent focus of childhood, the kind of peace he'd fought wars to protect. He was pulling a 2x4 from the truck bed when he heard tires screech behind him. A police cruiser, white with blue lettering, had pulled up fast, parking at an aggressive angle that blocked his driveway. Marcus's training kicked in immediately, situational awareness, threat assessment. His body didn't tense. 20 years of combat operations had taught him that tension telegraphs fear, and fear escalates situations. He remained calm, casual, unthreatening. The officer who emerged was young, maybe late 20s, pale skin flushed red with something Marcus immediately recognized, adrenaline mixed with assumption. His hand rested on his service weapon as he approached. "Step away from the vehicle," the officer barked. Marcus blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" "I said step away from the vehicle, hands where I can see them." Marcus's jaw tightened slightly, but his hands rose slowly, palms forward, non-threatening. The lumber dropped back into the truck bed with a clatter. "Officer, this is my house. That's my truck. Is there a problem?" "We got a call about a suspicious person breaking into vehicles in this neighborhood." Marcus glanced down at himself. Cargo shorts, a faded Marines t-shirt, work boots. Then at his truck,
his driveway, his home. "I live here. My name is Marcus Freeman. I can show you my ID if—" "Don't move!" The officer's voice cracked slightly. His hand gripped his service weapon tighter. A second cruiser pulled up. Then a third. Angela appeared in the doorway, Zara on her hip. Her nurse's training told her immediately something was wrong, very wrong. "Marcus?" Her voice carried across the lawn, concern threaded through it. "Stay inside, Angela," Marcus called back, his voice steady, despite the ice forming in his chest, despite the familiar, suffocating weight settling over him. The weight every black man in America knows too well, of being guilty until proven innocent, of being a threat for simply existing. And in that moment, Marcus Freeman, Delta Force commander, decorated soldier, devoted father, realized that all his training, all his service, all his sacrifices meant absolutely nothing. Not here. Not now. Not to these badges. The lead officer, his nameplate read Brennan, circled Marcus like a predator assessing prey. His hand never left his weapon. His eyes never softened with recognition or reason. "ID. Now. Slowly." Marcus moved with deliberate, measured precision, the kind of control that comes from defusing bombs, not from fear of police. But today it was absolutely about fear. Not for himself, for Angela, for Zara. He reached slowly toward his back pocket. "My wallet is in my—" "Hands up! Get your hands up!" Marcus froze mid-reach, his hands shot back up. "You just asked me to—" "Shut up! I didn't tell you to talk." Brennan's voice was shrill now, high-pitched with an authority he clearly didn't feel, trying desperately to project through volume. The other officers had fanned out, standard tactical positioning, one approaching from Marcus's right, another remaining by the vehicles. They were treating this like a high-risk felony stop. For a man, standing in his own driveway, beside his own truck. Angela stepped onto the porch, her voice sharp with the kind of authority only nurses and mothers possessed. "Excuse me, officers, this is my husband. We live here. What is happening right now?" Officer Brennan barely glanced at her. "Ma'am, get back inside now." "I will not get back inside. You're harassing my husband in front of our home, in front of our daughter." Angela's voice cracked on the last word. Zara had begun to cry, sensing her mother's distress, her small fists clutching Angela's shirt. "Ma'am, if you don't go inside, we'll arrest you for obstruction." "Obstruction?" Angela's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Obstruction of what?" Marcus's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Every instinct screamed at him to protect his family, to step between his wife and these badges, to shield her daughter from this trauma that would scar her for life. But he knew, God, he knew that any sudden movement, any perceived aggression, could end with bullets, could end with Zara watching her father die in their driveway over lumber and chalk drawings. "Angela," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of command, the same tone he'd used to lead men in combat. "Take Zara inside, please." Angela's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to fight. Every fiber of her being screamed to fight. But she saw something in Marcus's eyes, a plea, a calculation, a sacrifice. She nodded once and disappeared inside, Zara's wails echoing as the door closed. Officer Brennan barely glanced at her. "Ma'am, get back inside, now." Officer Brennan smirked, just slightly, just enough for Marcus to see it. And something inside Marcus, something he'd kept carefully controlled through firefights and torture resistance training, flickered dangerously. "Turn around, hands on the truck." Marcus complied, slowly, his palms pressed against the hot metal of his truck bed, the same truck he'd driven to surprise Zara with ice cream last week, the same truck that had hauled donations to the veterans shelter, the same truck that represented freedom and normalcy and all the things he'd fought for. Now, It was a prop in his own degradation. Brennan approached from behind. Marcus could hear the leather of his duty belt creaking, could smell the coffee on his breath, could feel the performative aggression radiating off him like heat. "What do you got on you?" "No." "Drugs?" "No." "What's in the truck?" "Lumber, for a treehouse, for my daughter." Right, lumber, sure. His hands began patting down Marcus roughly, aggressive, invasive. Not the professional search Marcus had witnessed countless times in his career. This was something else. This was power being exercised because it could be. Marcus's breathing remained controlled. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The same technique he'd used during SEER training. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. The same technique that had gotten him 72 hours of simulated capture. But this wasn't training. This was America. His America. The one he'd bled for. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Brennan asked, his tone implying Marcus couldn't possibly belong here. "I live here." "Yeah, where?" "This house, right here, 2847 Maple Drive." "You got proof of that?" "My ID is in my wallet, which you won't let me retrieve. My wife is inside. My daughter is inside. Our mail is probably in the mailbox with our names on it. What exactly would you like me to—" "Don't get smart with me." Brennan shoved Marcus harder against the truck. Not enough to be caught on camera as excessive, just enough to humiliate, to remind him who held the power here. A neighbor, Mrs. Chen from 3 houses down, had emerged on her porch, phone raised, recording. Marcus caught her eye briefly. She looked horrified. Other neighbors were appearing now, doors opening, faces in windows. The suburban theater of black trauma, performed live for an audience that would later claim they never knew there were problems in this neighborhood. Officer 2 approached, name tag reading Dalton, carrying something from the truck bed, the 2x4. He examined it like it was evidence. This could be used as a weapon. Marcus almost laughed. Would have if the situation wasn't so catastrophically absurd. "It's lumber, for a treehouse. There's a receipt from Home Depot in the cab if you'd like to—" "I didn't ask you to talk." The situation was escalating in that particular way Marcus recognized from his military career, when someone in command isn't over their head and doubling down instead of de-escalating, when ego eclipses reason, when pride becomes more dangerous than the perceived threat. "Run his plates," Brennan ordered. The radio crackled. Dispatch responded within seconds. "Tag comes back to a 2019 Chevy Silverado, registered to Marcus Freeman, 2847 Maple Drive." There was a pause. A long, heavy pause where reality should have penetrated, where reasonable men would have apologized and left. But Brennan wasn't a reasonable man. He was a man whose authority had just been challenged by facts. "Anybody can steal plates," he muttered, loud enough for Marcus to hear, loud enough to justify continuing this travesty. Marcus's hands trembled slightly against the truck, not from fear, from rage, from 2 decades of service being invalidated, from having to remain calm while being treated like a criminal in front of his family, from the soul-deep exhaustion of being black in America. "You got a criminal record, Freeman?" "No." "Ever been arrested?" "No." "Anybody inside the house who can verify your identity?" "My wife, who you threatened to arrest." "You're being difficult on purpose because I can make this a lot harder for you." Marcus closed his eyes, breathed, calculated. In another life, in another context, he would have neutralized this threat in 3 moves, would have had Brennan disarmed and subdued before the man's training even registered what happened. But this wasn't combat. This wasn't war. This was Saturday afternoon. In America. In his driveway. And the only weapon he had was compliance. Even though compliance was never protected men who looked like him. Even though compliance was just another word for survival. "I'm not being difficult," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying a resignation that broke something inside him. "I'm just trying to go home, which is where I already am." Brennan stepped back. For a moment, just a moment, Marcus thought reason might prevail. Then he said the words that changed everything. "Cuff him!" The metal bit into Marcus's wrists with a familiar weight. He'd worn handcuffs before, in training, in exercises, in scenarios designed to prepare soldiers for capture. But this was different. This wasn't preparation. This was degradation. Public, purposeful, profound in its injustice. Angela burst from the house, Zara still clinging to her. "What are you doing? He hasn't done anything. Ma'am, step back." Dalton moved to intercept her, his hands raised in a placating gesture that read as threat. Marcus turned his head, his voice sharp with command despite the restraints. "Angela, record this. Record everything. Now." She fumbled for her phone with one hand, Zara sobbing against her shoulder. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped it. But she raised it, pointed it at her husband, her decorated soldier husband in handcuffs in their driveway while their neighbors watched. "State your badge numbers," Marcus said, his tone shifting entirely. This wasn't the compliant civilian anymore. This was the commander. "State them clearly for the recording." Brennan's face flushed darker. "You don't get to give orders." "I'm not giving orders. I'm documenting this violation of my constitutional rights. Your badge number. Now." Mrs. Chen's voice called from down the street, sharp and clear. "I'm recording too, and I'm calling your supervisor." More phones appeared, more witnesses. The theater was growing and Brennan was losing control of the narrative. Marcus could see it in his eyes, the flicker of doubt, the creeping realization that this wasn't going to end well for anyone. "Search the house," Brennan ordered suddenly, desperately. "No!" Angela's shout was primal. "You do not have permission. You do not have a warrant." "We have probable cause." "Probable cause for what?" Angela's voice cracked with fury and anguish. "He's standing in his own driveway, at his own home. What is your probable cause?" Marcus's military mind was working through scenarios, calculating outcomes, assessing risks. This was going to end one of several ways, and most of them were bad. But there was one card left to play, one truth that would either save him or irreversibly prove how broken the system was. "Officer Brennan," Marcus said, his voice dropping to that particular frequency that makes men listen, the voice of command, of authority, of someone who has led men through hell and brought them home. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to contact Joint Base McGuire. Ask for Colonel Patricia Hendricks. Tell her that Commander Marcus Freeman is currently in custody in Riverside, New Jersey." Brennan sneered. "Commander, you expect me to believe—" "I don't expect you to believe anything," Marcus interrupted, his eyes locking onto Brennan's with an intensity that finally made the officer hesitate. "I'm telling you what's going to happen in the next 10 minutes. You're going to call that number. You're going to speak to that colonel. And you're going to realize that you've just handcuffed a Delta Force commander in front of his family for the crime of being black in his own driveway." The words hung in the air like ordnance. Dalton stepped closer to Brennan, his voice low. "Maybe we should verify." "I don't need to verify anything." But Brennan's voice had lost its edge. Doubt had crept in, poisoning his certainty. Angela's phone was still raised, still recording. Her voice was steel wrapped in tears. "You're going to be famous, Officer Brennan. You're going to be a hashtag, a headline, a case study in what's wrong with this country. And my husband who has served this nation for 20 years, who has bled for your freedom, is going to be another statistic of racial profiling." Zara's sobs had quieted to hiccups, her wide eyes taking everything in, recording it in that permanent, traumatic way that children record the moments their sense of safety shatters. She would remember this, forever. The day police put handcuffs on her daddy for standing in their driveway. Marcus looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and something inside him, something that had survived torture and combat and loss, broke completely. Not because of the handcuffs, not because of the humiliation, but because his daughter was learning at age 5 that her father's service didn't matter. His medals didn't matter. His sacrifice didn't matter. His skin was the only thing that mattered. And no amount of training, no level of authority, no patriotic service could ever change that fundamental, devastating truth. "Take the cuffs off," Marcus said quietly, "or make the call. But choose now.
because every second this continues, every second you deny my humanity while my daughter watches, you're proving something I've spent my entire life trying not to believe." Brennan's hand moved toward his radio. And in that moment, in that terrible, crystallizing moment, Marcus Freeman understood exactly what kind of country he'd really been fighting for.
The radio call to Joint Base McGuire took 3 minutes. The arrival of Colonel Patricia Hendricks, who happened to be off duty and living 20 minutes away, took 12. The look on Officer Brennan's face when a decorated Army colonel stepped out of her civilian vehicle and confirmed that, yes, Marcus Freeman was indeed one of the most highly trained soldiers in the United States military, that was instantaneous. The handcuffs came off without apology, without explanation. The officers retreated to their vehicles with muttered excuses about following protocol and responding to a call that mysteriously no one could produce any record of when asked. Colonel Hendricks, a petite black woman whose uniform carried more commendations than all 3 officers combined, stood in Marcus's driveway and delivered a 15-minute dissertation on respect, service, and constitutional rights that left Brennan visibly shaken. But she wasn't the hero of this story, and that's what made it so devastating. Because Marcus shouldn't have needed a colonel to vouch for his humanity. He shouldn't have needed military credentials to be treated with basic dignity. His citizenship should have been enough. His presence in his own driveway should have been enough. Him being human should have been enough. After the police left, after the colonel departed with a promise to follow up with the department, after the neighbors finally retreated to their homes with uncomfortable expressions and half-formed promises to do something, Marcus sat on his porch steps. Angela sat beside him, Zara finally asleep against her chest, exhausted from crying. They didn't speak for a long time. What was there to say? What words could possibly address what had just happened? "I'm sorry," Marcus finally whispered. Angela's head whipped toward him. "Sorry? Marcus, you have nothing to be sorry for." "I'm sorry that service wasn't enough. I'm sorry that compliance wasn't enough. I'm sorry that doing everything right still wasn't enough." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry that our daughter watched her father get handcuffed for existing." Angela's tears came fresh and hot. "This isn't your fault. This is never your fault." But Marcus couldn't shake it. 20 years, 2 decades of service, of sacrifice, of bleeding for a flag that didn't protect him when he needed it most. What did it mean? What had it been for? The story didn't end with justice. Officer Brennan received a verbal reprimand, nothing in his permanent file. The department issued a statement about additional training. The local news ran the story for exactly 1 cycle before moving on to something more palatable. Mrs. Chen's video went viral for 48 hours before being buried under the next trending crisis. No charges were filed, no accountability was enforced, no systemic change was implemented. Because that's how these stories end. Not with justice, not with reform, not with the sweeping change that righteously angry social media posts promise. They end with exhaustion, with families trying to rebuild a sense of safety that can never truly be restored, with children processing trauma they should never have experienced, with decorated soldiers wondering why their service matters everywhere except at home. Marcus Freeman's story ended without fanfare. His family healed, slowly. His daughter started therapy. His wife campaigned for police reform that went nowhere. His neighbors avoided eye contact at the grocery store. And life continued, because that's what life does, even after injustice, even after trauma, even after everything you believed about equality and fairness and justice is revealed to be conditional at best, illusory at worst.